Hello and good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are watching this latest Susty talk from Edie. This is our ongoing series of video interviews that we started all the way back in 2020, and this will be our first one of the new year 2022, I believe. And I'm delighted to be joined by a friend of Edie who's dialing in from London, and it's Tor Burrows from Grosvenor, who is their Executive Director of Sustainability and Innovation. So great to see you, Tor. How are you doing?
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here. I'm very well, thanks. Last day of January, so looking forward to a big 2022.
Same, and definitely looking forward to some longer days and some more sunshine.
Definitely, yeah.
As well, we're both just saying off call that we've both been busy, but that January is always a hard month.
Yeah.
And Tor, it's great to catch up with you. I don't think we've caught up since pre-COP, and everything's been a bit of a blur since then, and now we're sort of getting into feet under the table plan for the new year mode. So it'd be great to hear about your experience at COP, and I've got in my notes that you were a COP26 ambassador.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, it feels like ages ago, doesn't it, COP?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I was lucky enough to be a UK Green Building Council COP ambassador, and I was actually in Glasgow for the whole 2 weeks, which felt like a real privilege, actually. So I'll just touch on the ambassador role and then go straight into some COP reflections. So I think the ambassador role was actually an amazing experience. So there was a really diverse group from the property sector that came together about this time last year, which was spearheaded by the UK Green Building Council. And we had three aims, to promote the sector, so to promote the built environment. As a sector, we're responsible for about 40% of global emissions. So we really want to be part of the solution, not just the problem. Secondly, to advocate for policy change, and then also to sort of encourage corporates to make bolder green commitments and action around that by signing up to the UN Race to Zero as well. So those were sort of our three key aims, and it was a great and really rewarding experience. I think some of the highlights being the UK Green Building Council launched a virtual pavilion, which you can still look at now, actually, which is a sort of online platform, so a website which showcases sort of best class or best practice built environment projects for all over the world. So everything from new builds to retrofit, environmental focus, social focus. So it's just a really great sort of data bank of brilliant projects that everyone around the world can learn from in the built environment sector. So I really encourage everyone to have a look at it. And then the whole life carbon roadmap, which I think we're going to come on to talk about, and of course getting lots of corporates and governments and institutions signed up to Race to Zero. So it was a brilliant experience. I feel like you always feel like you can do more in those types of roles, but great to be part of championing the built environment sector at COP. And then just the second part of your question, Sarah, just moving on to some reflections. I suppose lots of people say to me, was COP successful? And I suppose did we get what we want from COP? Probably not, but I think the positive and optimistic side of me is it was definitely a step forward. Depending on action post COP, which is obviously critical. COP's just a moment in time. 1.5 degree warming, or staying within 1.5 degree warming, is still alive. And some positives to take from COP. I felt that the business community were very active at COP, more than I've ever seen before. And I think there was generally a real acceptance for the role that corporates can play in the transition to net zero. And we can't wait for government. So I think that was positive and sort of translating those commitments into action. I also think innovation really came to the fore at COP. This is part of my role at Grosvenor deliberately, that sustainability and innovation is put together, because we can't transition to a low carbon economy doing everything the same as we did before. And particularly in the built environment sector, I feel really strongly that the way we built buildings have essentially been the same for hundreds of years. We've got to innovate and do things differently. And I think there's a lot we can learn from, that the built environment can learn from other sectors. And that was really showcased at COP. And then the final point, I think it's been well documented, but I thought it was encouraging that financial firms that cover, I think it's about 40% of global GDP now have net zero commitments, which covers about $95 trillion. So, that's really encouraging that sort of finance is also making that transition, and it's going to become harder to access finance if you don't have those net zero carbon commitments, then you're not delivering on them. So, I don't think it was a complete success, but I think there's definitely positives we can take from it.
Of course, and I was only there for the 1 week, but yeah, it feels a long time ago, but still like a complete whirlwind, and still like there's so much to do. And from other people that I spoke to there and since then, I've heard a lot of the times that yes, the business community was super active, and having UK government of host, we would expect them to say, oh, the solution is UK PLC, we want to showcase British innovation, we want to show ourselves as a financial centre. And you've mentioned some of the things that were going on for businesses there. So for the UK built environment sector specifically, there was that whole life carbon roadmap and the pavilion from UK GBC that you mentioned. We also saw announcements like the SBTI finally coming out with its net zero corporate standard. So I was hoping to get your reflections on those specific things that were going on for businesses and what that will mean for UK businesses in property development going forward.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the UK Green Building Council Whole Life Carbon Roadmap, which was launched on the second Thursday at COP on Built Environment Day. Essentially, this is a sort of net zero carbon pathway to 2050 for the built environment, and it's the pathway to show how we can get there, but also some policy recommendations and sort of industry action plans to deliver it. So it's really comprehensive, and actually highlights how critical the built environment is to the UK as a whole net zero pathway as well. So, I'll just pull out two examples of some of the recommendations from the Whole Life Carbon Roadmap. One of the first ones is a nationwide retrofit programme of existing homes, which everyone in the built environment will probably smile at this point. We've got to do more around retrofitting existing properties and particularly homes, phasing out fossil fuels, and enabling efficient, warm and cheaper homes. So I think that's one that's really important and sort of close to my heart. We've had a retrofit programme at Grosvenor since 2013. And last year we committed a further £90 million to our retrofit programme. So I think the UK getting behind this and being upfront about the cost to retrofit our homes will be critical. And then the second one I wanted to pull out was the shift to whole life carbon measurements for buildings. There is more awareness, I think, of the operational carbon of buildings, but I feel like the embodied carbon is this sort of sleeping giant, which not many people are tackling. And we've got to think about the whole life approach of both operational and embodied carbon and tackle both. So the materials, the carbon embedded in the materials we use, and the implications that have on planning policy for new builds, on VAT and incentivisation, and policy around the encouragement of the reuse of existing buildings and materials as well. So both of those two examples, I think, are areas all corporates in the built environment need to tackle now, and it needs to be embedded into company-wide roadmaps. So that's the Whole Life Carbon Roadmap. And then just moving on to the Science-Based Target initiative and update, which is not specific to the built environment, and is that a globally recognised standard, which is really important. And the SBTI announced just before COP actually that sort of the first net zero corporate standard aligning sort of longer term action to 2050 as well as their 2030 interim target in order to limit global warming to maximum of 1.5 degrees. So the sort of the previous 2030 target of a 50% reduction is still in place, but that's now called an interim target. And then the long-term target to 2050 demands a deep cut and in emissions, so a 90% reduction in emissions, and then offsetting the remainder prior to 2050. So it's a bigger stretch for everyone, and actually Grosvenor submitted our longer term target as well, building on our 2030 interim target at the start of this year. And I think it's going to challenge lots of businesses who might have to reevaluate their baseline in order to reach that sort of 90% reduction by 2050 at the latest. So harder to achieve, but welcome, because it we need to make these cuts and accelerate our decarbonisation to keep in line with 1.5 degree warming.
It's interesting to see, and I look forward to seeing more of those come out. I think as well that will help overcome. A lot of people said, oh, even 2025, 2030 is short term, but if we have those long term targets, then that helps to get it into the culture of a business, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be interesting because these longer term targets are outside the sort of lifespan of management and board planning cycles, so making sure we stay focused on the sort of shorter term or interim target of 2030, while also enabling us to make those deeper decarbonisation cuts by 2050.
And I know that Grosvenor actually it's sort of a 2-year anniversary, a month out really, since the launch of the 2030 net zero pledge, which came out in December 2020. Yes. And I'm aware that as well as a move being submitting to the SBTi to look at that new standard, has been an acceleration, so a change in offsetting plans. So it'd be good to recap on that and why that acceleration was taken as well.
Yeah, of course. So exactly as you said, Sarah. So 2 years ago, we launched our detailed net zero carbon pathway to 2030, which was validated by the Science Based Target Initiative at the time. So that is still our interim target, and that through that we committed to at least a 52% reduction in all our emissions, so scope 1, 2, and 3, including our supply chain. And clearly that remains. That reduction pathway absolutely remains our number one priority and essential to transition to a low carbon economy. Last year, we announced that we had sort of beaten the first 2 years of our pathway by achieving a 20% reduction. So we're on track to hit our 2030 reduction targets, which is great. And really great to see, those targets translate into real action. So just moving on to offsetting, we originally planned to offset at 2030 once we achieved our reduction targets. But I think we really have since taken the view that we want to accelerate our climate action. We're still responsible for about 500,000 tonnes of carbon between now and 2030. And at the same time as reducing our emissions and increasing renewables, of course, we want to take responsibility for the emissions that we're still responsible for. And that ultimately means offsetting. So, why wait? Why should we wait till 2030 to do that when we can, invest in climate projects that take carbon out the atmosphere at the same time as our reduction pathway? So we debated it for a long time because the market is nascent, it's not straightforward, but I suppose we came to the conclusion that we see benefits of bringing our offsetting forward because, frankly, the climate emergency demands it. Only, as we know, rapid and urgent reductions will prevent climate breakdown, and funding carbon removal projects from the atmosphere will be an important part of that. But also, just from a corporate perspective, we want to build expertise, we want to build governance, we want to build long-term relationships with advisors and partners in order to deliver the sort of permanent, transparent, additional high-quality offsets that we want. And we think it's going to be really hard to do that as we move to 25, 26, 27, nearer 2030. It's going to be much harder to do that. So we sort of taken the view that we shouldn't wait. We should get on. We should, offset at the same time as our reduction pathway. And if we can help by showing the industry that there is a really valid business case for offsetting, and ultimately help remove carbon from the atmosphere as well as our decarbonisation pathway, that can only be a good thing.
And I wanted to dig into this a little bit more, because we'll have a lot of people reading and listening that are grappling with offsetting at their own businesses, or looking at offsetting in partners, clients, investees. And you've mentioned there the importance of having these offsets being permanent and high quality, which is always mentioned. So I wanted to talk about whether you're going for nature-based solutions, or, for example, offsets that avoid dirty cook fuels, or whether you're looking at more longer-term emerging technologies.
Yeah, so we're taking quite a long-term view on our offset approach. So we almost want to build like a portfolio approach to our offsetting. Because naturally as well, there's a delay in investment in offsetting, particularly with nature-based solutions, and when trees and peatland, etc., and soil start sequestering carbon. So initially we will champion nature-based solutions such as tree planting and ecosystem or peatland restoration. We are looking as well at investing in like technological solutions to the climate emergency, but we recognise that these won't give offset credits immediately, but we think if they can help us transition to a low carbon economy, they could be part of the solution in the future. So we want to build it's almost like a portfolio approach to our offsetting investments, but very much initially focused on nature-based removal offsets. And then we want our strategy to adapt over time as our market matures. But what's the most important part of it is ensuring that it's all our offsetting is aligned with the sort of governance criteria that we've set out in our strategy that we published at the end of last year, which, as you've mentioned some of them, Sarah, which is around, offsets being verifiable and robust, must prove additionality, so i.e. the removal or reduction wouldn't have happened without the funded project. There must be co-benefits, so broader environmental or social benefits, must champion innovation, and the partners that we choose, which I think is really important, in line with our values as a business. So that's our approach.
Great, thank you, and obviously best of luck with that, and hopefully we'll have some updates later in the year. And we've covered loads of ground there. So we've covered international climate agreements right down to the nitty-gritty of an individual offsetting strategy. But I think as obviously we're still in year ahead planning mode, it would be good to finish off by having a little preview of what you and your team will be focusing on in 2022.
Yes, great. Well, it's sure that going to be another busy year, which is great. So really my focus for this year and my team's focus is, delivering on and embedding our goals. So, for our decarbonisation pathway, it's hoping to continue to accelerate and beat our pathway. So we saved over 1,000 tonnes of carbon from our retrofit programme that I mentioned earlier last year, and we're doubling that programme this year. We're delivering, and hopefully we'll PC in September, our first net zero carbon office building. We're hoping to continue to sign many more green leases to increase the amount of our portfolio that's on renewable energy. And we're not just looking at our direct activity, we're also looking at our supply chain as well. So I'm very excited that this year we are going to be launching a SME supplier mentor program for all our small and medium suppliers to help them set science-based targets and help them on their decarbonisation pathway as well. So watch this space, but I'm hoping that's going to be a really successful supplier mentor program. So that's from a carbon perspective. But other areas of focus is we did quite a lot of work on our biodiversity strategy last year, so we're going to continue to implement that this year. And of course, we absolutely can't forget the S, so the social. And whilst we have lots of sort of social impact delivery on the ground at Grosvenor, we're pulling this together into our first corporate, corporate-wide social impact strategy this year, which we hope to launch in September. So that's going to be a real focus for the team as well.
Great. Well, September then, sort of back to school feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to touch base then or before, but thank you so much for your time, Tor, and it's great to catch up with you after all our work together on Countdown to COP.
Brilliant to see you, Sarah. Thanks very much.
Take care, Tor.
Bye.